Welcome to another Mish-Mashing Battle Lounge with 2MK team.
Let's do this.
As always, Mondays mean Street Fighter V. Kanzuki Dynasty, i.e. Rune Siren, is taking a break today. Therefore, if you wish to find our lounge to join it, you can search for 3 rounds, first to 2, and you're looking for Just Divine today. Amara is similarly taking a break, even though, obviously, you can see her account in the lounge. You may not, in fact, be seeing any Ryu action today, but we can count on Urian to handle our zoning for us. And give Just Fine a matchup that she does not see that often. Similarly, from Cosmo's side. As Yuri is still a little bit rare online for many somewhat good reasons. We're likely to see a lot more measured movement and slower pacing between these two, as that's just how they both tend to play. But, as they both also have V skills that benefit from those lulls in momentum, there is at least some incentive to keep the pressure on or keep a threat in the opponent's mind. Obviously, since it is Just Fine, you're also more likely to see perhaps some players of higher levels, as people do tend to join battle lounges relative to the rank they happen to be at.
Round 2. Fight.
This particular matchup also helps to lessen the direct stress on Just Fine's jury play, as it's not required that she have every combo ready at every time. Really got over.
You win.
As you can see, this sort of match is likely to take a lot longer.
Round 1. Fight.
More relaxed players tend to look for their openings in different places and ways than pressury or close-in players. They spend a lot more time paying attention to where they are on the screen and where exactly they want to put the opponent on the screen. It does take some time to build up an actual game plan out of this that tends to lead to something. But there's really no way to practice it other than to keep doing it.
Round two. Fight.
Here we see one of the relative weaknesses of Juri's Fireball in this matchup, mainly that it functionally is not necessarily a low in the direct sense, but certainly something that Yurian can go over with Headbutt. Meaning she cannot necessarily use it to pin him down in pressure in the same way. Still, recognizing that the situation has shifted to that can be a little hard at first. And since he must obviously have charge in order to do this, it can be a little rougher. But since it's often true that Yurian players will be used to this from the perspective of trying to get over things with violent knee drop, it's really just changing a button.
You win. It's go time. Let's do this.
As we have been purposely living the poverty life for some time now, the Juri vs Sakura matchup is not actually one that has generally been as available to the team. However, Sakura as a character has approximately equal footsie ability to Juri, and while I would not say that the two characters have particularly similar game plans, the responses they have to standing in certain places on screen
Fight.
tend to be about the same. It's just what happens after one of them wins that shifts. Juri tends to need a little more space than Sakura does, so you'll find her more often backdashing and looking to get enough charge to confirm into something relatively big once she's got it. Sakura can use charged fireballs of almost every kind to give Juri general stress, as regular Fuharin and similar things don't immediately deal with the charged Hadouken. But at the end of the day, Juri has more control due to the fact that she can get to the other side of the screen as she needs to, whereas Sakura can be walked down more or less. And if you're brave enough about it, it's not all that difficult to do. In fact, it's one of the character's few hard weaknesses. Because her projectile is relatively slow, she has to make a relative read on whether or not she wants to throw it in a particular way. And Juri is a character that has ways around this. It's slow enough that she can just Ryodan Tatsu on reaction to seeing Sakura try to use it at certain ranges, meaning that walking her down becomes even more potentially useful. And when Juri does not want to walk her down, she usually has enough time to get Fuharin charges, and if pushed away, sometimes V-skill charges. So from the sides of both players, this is mostly about staying calm and looking for opportunities, and controlling that part of your mind that gets stressed out about not knowing exactly what's going on in the match at any given time, because the opponent isn't moving per se. There you see Juri's stronger ability to move out of the way of situations, helping her out there. But the hard part is always the corner guard. Just Fine is used to characters with stronger corner guard than Juri as a whole. Not only are they stronger in their corner guard, the execution of the corner guard they have is usually easier. Some characters can just use their air throw for corner guard, but Juri is a little bit difficult to do here, as she has to do her air throw quite late. And the spacing she wants to stand at is not usually one where it's a great idea. However, she can corner guard with Fuharin itself if she happens to have any of them that aren't stocked. Remaining aware of this, though, is even more work. Making one of your best options when the opponent has been pushed to the corner, immediately mentally tracking which Fuharin you have charged and not charged. That showdown of the medium kicks has not shown up yet. Both these characters have good standing medium kicks to hit in neutral situations, but because they both have such good standing medium kicks, deciding when exactly to hit it can be a lot harder. For Jury, of course, a scramble is basically a good place to hit it. She has a lot more situations after which she gets benefits from hitting it than Sakura does. Sakura is plus, but this only matters a lot in very specific situations.
Round 2. Fight.
Seems Just Fine's noted that she can probably get away with a lot of anti-airs. And our Sakura is jumping at some anti-airable ranges. Since Shuri can often avoid a standard anti-air situation, if she happens to be charging her B skill at the time, i.e. she can just dash back out. Is it too early? Nope. And the fake out.
Final round. Fight.
One of Yuri's better tactics. From here, it's mostly going to be a matter of figuring out how to not get caught or confirmed into Sakura's super, as that's most likely what that meter is going to be. But nope, confirm is done. Making this now an issue of the comeback, if there's a chance from Just Fine's side, but presumably that clean super will fix it for Safrasha? Safrasha. Just Fine does have her own, which is enough to make a comeback and full charge on everything, but as she noted before, her jury execution is not exactly going to be the best yet, meaning that it's really hard to actually verify this sort of situation. To just go, okay, I've got tons of meter or whatever, I can do this. But it can still be useful to believe that you have the option for it and understand things from there.
Yeah, a lot of that was missing out on some of those confirms and dropping combos, and sometimes the anti-airs, although I seemed to be getting a hang of it once I got a little more lock on to their rhythm.
one. Fight.
One of the classic mistakes new players make is a little bit misunderstood when people are trying to tell them how to play better.
Round two.
Basically being told, you jump too much. Now, obviously, if you jump a lot, you will get anti-aired a lot, and bad things will happen. But it isn't specifically that jumping is the problem. It's that jumping is the first thing you do. You'll notice that our Ken player, for example, barely ever moves by walking. If you find yourself just getting used to the game and not really knowing what to do in situations like that, it's not really that you have to get rid of your entire instinct to jump or even move by jumping. But just that you have to work in some other movement so that the jumps work.
Sakura wins.
Yeah, I found one of the things that helped me learn that sort of thing was thinking more towards what is this for? Why am I doing this sort of thing?
Round one.
Because, like, I didn't necessarily jump a lot because I just don't really like jumping, but I did dash more than I really needed to at first. And it was sort of the same thing. I was trying to clear a space. I wasn't trying to, like, make my opponent react to something and using that to my advantage or anything like that. It was just, I wanted to move. And moving forward normally didn't feel safe.
The interesting thing about this is that you often come to completely incorrect conclusions about how to move. Dashing and jumping are blatantly less safe than just walking. They're just also more rewarding when they work. And that's one of the hardest things to get used to in fighting games. That as you get better at them, you have to refine your gambling. You have to change the way you think about risks. So here we are starting to see some of Ken's very strong gap closing space ability. It is difficult to match his ability to close gaps.
Sakura wins. Let's do this.
with a switch to Lara, we are now going back to a situation that Cosmic Wolf is actually slightly more familiar with. But that doesn't mean it's going to be more easy to deal with. We'll note that Tavares is actually a balanced player according to the system, i.e. that they're willing to back off just about as often as they're willing to come in. As general advice for beginner players, on the first knockdown that Lara manages, defend. The V-trigger 2 is also not likely to be surprising, so and the reset grab, but not quite the kill.
Final round. Fight.
Urien can actually manage a fairly large amount of control against Lara in a lot of matchups. However, if Lara is calm enough about it, eventually that control has to be lost basically by definition. And Urien has to therefore, rather than try to hold control for the entire time, recognize when he has it and use that timing to get armored up. Charge clap is a good timing for this, as well as just general movement that Lara is doing in neutral that isn't specifically intended to get in. His long buttons help a lot with the rest of it. Ooh, the whiff. Very close. And the rest is just anti-airs.
Lara wins.
In this particular match though, it doesn't look like the anti-airs are going to be what Cosmic Wolf needs. Or rather, his opponent's concept of the space to jump from and the things to distract while jumping are good enough that the anti-air would probably be beyond his skill level at this point. Or force him to use the anti-air metallic sphere, which is honestly very risky against Lara. She can move in too quickly, make attacks that get through, and so on, without him being able to do too much.
Given their concept, I would think that the V reversal would actually be a little more helpful than the mirrors in some cases as well. But I'm not sure Wolf has trained that yet.
The main benefit of the V reversal would actually be on wake up of a specific knockdown, and for that you have to learn a bunch of things about Lara knockdowns. She does create a space between her and you that is really difficult to deal with if you're not familiar enough, because she can do so many things from that exact space. Unfortunately, as usual, we don't really know where people are relative to each other. A choice they made when they decided to not have pain show. But we can use geographical locations to give us some idea, i.e. both these players are more than 4 bars to me. Sorry, more than 3 bars to me. Center being 4, and Sfrash being 5. But that does not really tell us whether or not they're close enough to each other for this to work.
Boom! That's how you start the fight and finish it quickly.
Either way, let's see what we get. So yes, if Lara generally freaks you out, after a throw knockdown, especially a command throw knockdown, defend simply because it will teach you more about the player than not. Any subsequent knockdowns, things like sweeps, you got anti-aired and messed up, go with your instincts, go crazy if you want, uppercut if you want, whatever. But throws are often a place where you can defend until you can see a change in situation. Most of the time, her jumps will be dashable. You can dash forward or dash backward with certain characters, but usually dash forward. But there are just enough to keep this up, and that's the end of it though. So not quite enough.
That was pretty awesome though.
Lara wins.
I don't think I've seen that many double hit fireballs thrown in a row and break the armor that many times in a row. Oh man.
Well, both players were very insistent on their game plans, which is kind of interesting to watch as a general thing.
Indeed.
Lara is one of the characters against whom, if she's on offense, Akuma has a lot more to benefit from being lit than he normally does. The movement does not work too well against defending people unless you cancel it, but against an offensive Lara who is not right in your face, it will get you out of the way of most of the things she wants to do without you getting hurt. This will force the player to become defensive fairly quickly, however, so it's more of a use this move once to put on the status to make them not do this thing. And then maybe you have situations set up. But I'm actually gonna believe this is probably pretty laggy. Because I'm seeing some stuff from both sides that would indicate that they can't see the opponent's movement that well.
Yeah, their spacing seems a little off.
Unfortunately, as I said, no real way to know that, given that we have been using the flag system for some reason. And the flag system does not tell you a whole lot.
Nope, especially with as big of countries as are in existence. I think this is one of the ones I get to use. No, I'll just use V-Trigger 1 for this.
No, this is VT2.
Oh,
This one is one
it?
where you can use VT2.
I think I wanted the double hit fireball against them specifically.
Well, they too have changed in their VT1, so you have more to worry about.
Round one.
Yeah.
In terms of mobility, anyway. But Yuri does handle Laura's VT1 fairly well, as she has a lot of quick movements that push her to different sides of the screen, and help her avoid some of Laura's movements. She may not be able to get much out of it directly, but we're already, of course, seeing the anti-airs come in. But there was the first throw knockdown. It's a good habit to build up as a whole. Lara players get a lot of mileage out of the tendency of players to ignore that difference between Lara and other characters. When most other characters throw you with their command grabs or whatever, they're coming up right next to you in order to get the next mix-up. They're immediately dashing forward or whatever. So, if their timing is off, it makes sense to wake up with stuff. But Lara has options to hit you from there. And if you just mash buttons because you're used to mashing buttons, she'll get that hit. And the damage will not be small. The other thing you can learn about this character as a whole is that in scrambles, particularly in neutral jumpy ones, because you're supposed to neutral jump against Lara as well, if she's approaching you on the ground. But in scrambles in general, where you don't know what's going on, backdash. This is almost 100% true because she's one of the characters with the least strong chase in the game. She does have chase moves, but many of them are relatively slow. And Lara has many more situations in which she has to go to heavily committed moves or grabs. Even when you get hit by these, sometimes the backdash has saved you. So just as a general beginner tactic how to deal with Lara when you feel as if the character is just overwhelming, those are the two things to know. Pay attention to after throw knockdowns because your instincts from the rest of the game, she's likely to be subverting your expectations. And when you are playing neutral with her and end up in a scramble, either because you neutral jumped or because you both jumped or because someone blocked for too long, backdash in these situations. You can also backdash out of situations where you feel like you're going to be punished, because it's better than blocking most of the time. Characters like Juri and Cammy who have good backdashes are even more frustrating here, as they tend to be just out of range of a ton of stuff Lara wants to do, and the backdash just complicates that whole situation even more. Whereas things like back jump are too slow, Lara can keep up with you either on the ground or by going for her overhead after a slight walk forward. And if she does it in that position, she's more likely to get a little bit out of it as compared to doing it against your backdash. The neutral jump in question is more so for stopping Lara from approaching you from the ground. But in this case, it looks like that's not really going to be the main problem to deal with.
This person is pretty relentless. I probably need to adjust the way I react to their jumping a little bit, though.
Fight.
It's not that there's a huge problem with what I'm doing right now, but it requires me to have a reflex I don't have, which is to essentially, on landing from my back jump, immediately go into pinwheel.
For Lara, the answer to this is simple but risky. She often needs to chase with her medium bolt, or in scrambles where she expects a shift, just throw out medium or light clap very quickly. The medium clap is used against zoners and strong space control characters, and light clap is used against characters who are likely to jump or who have some sort of variable approach that isn't just walking or jumping directly over her head. Depending on your character's backdash and both the timing and the spacing, you can combine this with your anti-air to help even against the Lara who jumps in reaction to the backdash, as you've just seen. It turned into a trade in that case, but often that trade is still enough of use to you, not necessarily in your favor really, but useful enough that you could get away with something. Whereas jumping is more likely to lead to stress. Generally, neutral jumping against Lara when she's close to you is dangerous, because most Lara players are trained to react to neutral jumps. It's part of the way that they play the character. They get in to get close, expect you to neutral jump to get out of their throws or similar, and have whole setups for like anti-airing the neutral jump, punishing with heavy bolt, and so on.
Damn. Sure, now they don't.
Final round. Fight.
But that just means they're actually paying attention. So good on them, honestly.
A Lara who is willing to back off, as we've noted before, so far as it must be that Tara's player to get balanced as the thing. That really doesn't like putting people as balanced. You have to be fairly defensive before it says that. Therefore, the presumption is, once they start to move backwards, they're likely to keep moving backward, and it's not just some way of tricking you into thinking that they're going to do it. But you can see that this particular situation, the moment where both players have decided to do the backward jump, well, not the backward jump, but where both players have decided to jump, is not advantageous to either of them. And depending on your character, this becomes an advantage to Lara fairly quickly.
It's go time. Let's do this.
Yes, it puts you in a lot of... It's like never leaving the ground in the first place and being in a very scrambly situation.
But we're back to discussing jumping. At least, assuming that Arken does not massively change their game plan. And honestly, if they are in fact a rookie, I wouldn't necessarily go suggesting they change it. But it does have some relatively easy and fairly hard counters, so you do have to deal with that. The strongest counter to an opponent jumping from very far away is some form of move that retracts the hurt box of the defender before striking. Not a lot of moves do this, and it's hard to necessarily learn them all too easily. But if you can learn this for your character, you often have an advantage against zoners and people who jump from very far with very long buttons. For Jury, perfectly timed Fuharin actually do this job. And some of the Fuha releases do an even better job. Of course, if you can simply execute the uppercut style anti-air of your character if they have one, the problem is solved. But interestingly, when you're playing against a player who has not yet learned the nuances of jumping, you may end up getting mental fatigue from doing this, as it is always very slightly different. You can't just let yourself fall into the rhythm of, okay, all I have to do in this match is anti-air. Well, you can, but it's not usually a good idea. If you get surprised, you just tend to feel worse. So, in those cases, it can be helpful to have some other mindset, some other action, because zoning jumps, let's call them zoning jumps, jumping with the longest possible button, usually the head kick of a character. If perfectly spaced is one of the hardest things to stop in this game. To the point where some characters have something that we call the jump and crush, as it's almost impossible for an inexperienced player to anti-air, simply because there's so much depth to the move, so much time that they spend in the air not doing anything, and then just timing it so that basically the first active frame of their deepest button connects with effectively your character's chest or something.
I did not think that was going to combo, but I went for it anyway.
Round 2.
The trigger one is basically a custom super, so...
It's go time.
Okay, our Ken is ducking out, bringing us back to our original match.
Let's do this.
Alrighty.
Whether a
Back-
character actually has a zoning jump isn't necessarily too connected to their archetype. For example, among the Shotos, Ken and Ryu have it,
Fight.
Sakura and Akuma don't. Juri technically has one, but Juri's jump isn't the best for the purpose anyway. Whereas Bison has a zoning style jump, even though he technically doesn't zone that much. And Ed has one of the best in the game, even though it's not very clear. The problem in this case is really obvious. At full screen, Juri can react to nearly everything Urien does with her V-skill. Urien has a couple of ways around this, but they mostly involve advancing with light headbutt or just walking. Juri's control over Urien's movement, assuming she's gotten enough time to charge in the first place, is quite strong, as once she starts charging something, as the player gets better and better, they can learn to recognize whether or not the projectile will reach them before they end up being able to go through it or not. This is a Juri skill that you don't often need too much at higher levels, but does come in handy enough to be worth learning sometimes. Since Urien is not so good at chasing opponents, it forces him to rely on metered tackles, which Juri can still evade because at full screen she can just see them coming and deal with them some other way. But as you can see here, the first step is the light, or you can use heavy headbutt, but I think that's with punishable. Medium might not be at full speed. Juri, I think, would have to have either meter or... I don't think the heavy Fuharan would work, actually. It would depend on if you were mashing the stand medium kick right after, which is technically what you should be doing.
Round 1.
After a long headbutt, stand medium kick mashing is a good way to go. It's further helpful that once Urien has his charge, moving in with the headbutt is basically a free action. Juri has very few moves where the first hit will hit Urien and the second hit will finish him. In other words, her first hit tends to break his armor, but she will get hit by the headbutt before then. The key therefore from her side is to lure Urien into using up his armor without using the headbutt. Obviously, therefore, she tends to move away from him for relatively long periods, and she does have ways to cross to the other side. But Urien can walk her down as a character pretty easily, especially since he can walk behind his projectiles better than most characters can. Juri's goal in the matchup, therefore, is usually to get to the other side, push Urien into the corner, so that no matter what is going on, she has a massive amount of space behind her to retreat into. You'll see this fighting style used by, obviously, Infiltration, but Gentleman Thief has it as well. II does not tend to do this for reasons I'm not very clear on. Presumably because Juri's corner combos, while strong, are not quite as dangerous as trying to play neutral in mid-range. No meter though, so there it goes.
You win.
The checkmate situation.
last time I played this matchup was a while ago.
You mean with the Wolf or with Alex? Because you've definitely played with Alex recently. Anju.
The Wolf. I think.
Well, just consider it to be a completely different person then. Because the Wolf has been working quite heavily on a lot of little Alex things. So, most of the stuff you figured was weakness before, that you could get through this or could get away with this, not anymore.
Round one.
Alright.
Fight.
However, the ability to use Juri's V skill to handle Alex a lot does not change. Alex handles this similarly to Yuri. He has the capacity to use stomps, dive, and to use some extent even flash shot, and of course EX, but that's standard, to close in the space. But it really depends on whether or not he can bait Yuri into thinking that he's doing something. And as we've discussed before, just jumping forward with a cross-up button while Alex is trying to get to you, if your reactions are good enough or you've made a good read, it's probably bad for him, like really bad. This is, however, a match where Alex's stand heavy kick is really helpful at closing distance, whereas it wouldn't be otherwise. Like, just whiffing it in neutral can mess with Yuri's expectations quite a lot. Compared to most characters, she's not so great at dealing with it. Not because she can't punish it, but because the direction and spacing of the hit means she tends to be too far out to get anything. Add to this the fact that Alex often puts himself in a space where Yuri doesn't benefit from anything she wants to do. And he gets to hit that kick. Can shift the situation fairly heavily in her favor. What Just Fine has recently encountered though is the idea that certain characters are super weak to Yuri's hot kick. And Alex is functionally among those characters. There are a ton of things that he does that this move stops. Similar to how you can stop a lot of things he does with Ryu's Yugen Tatsu, and similar. Once in range, Alex is crouch heavy, as you've just seen, the shoulder charge, and his stand medium kick can put up enough control to make life hard. But these two are not necessarily a white health battle, but they spend a lot of time in that state of just hitting each other, taking off gray health, looking for the moment to throw and cash in on the gray health. They both get to hit their mediums against the other quite often, and spend a lot of time in positions like this.
That bait, I feel so good about that bait. Perfection.
Fight.
Obviously, since Alex's damage and conversions off that move, i.e. his stand heavy kick, are quite strong.
Looks like you could use more training.
He's usually fine. It's difficult for Juri to jump out of it, and it's not the range where she wants to hit her hot kick either, meaning that he basically has dominance at that space. The difficulty is making sure he gets into said space. Even more importantly, that he does not get distracted by trying to have charge when he already has a strong gap closing move. Juri isn't really a character who gets opened up by anything Alex's charges do anyway, so he can just play straight footsies. She's also a difficult character for him to throw for a ton of reasons. Like, nearly every reason. Everything Juri does makes it difficult for Alex to get throws on her. But not this time, as he has been training it at against BirdieBot, recognizing that timing where it has not gone his way, and making sure to not continue after hitting the bite.
That was fun. His hard work is definitely paying off. It's always nice to see when your friends get a little better.
It's go time.
Or fight bugs or whatever. Ooh. Haven't seen Django in a while.
Didn't Django have to make a new account? Which I guess would, if that is in fact the same person, which I presume it is, would explain the new account.
Wait, do we know multiple Djangos? I feel like we know multiple Djangos.
I don't think we know multiple Djangos. Juri versus Akuma is relatively easy for Akuma because he has a very difficult but almost 100% effective timing for using his parry against her neutral. And this neutral is the entire screen. It doesn't really matter where Juri is on the screen. Akuma can always use his parry. The hard part is making sure not to confirm the parry. Since there is a limited amount of time to do this, this is super hard to learn in the long run. But if you don't know what else to do as Akuma, and you feel as if things are going to get weird, just parry, because she does not have a lot of situations where she can break your parry. While the move is functionally unsafe, the spaces that Juri tends to put herself at are not spaces where Akuma has to worry a whole ton about this. He has advantage at close range, in general, i.e. if you are close enough that you can hit a different button, then you don't really need a parry. But there's that moment where you'll recognize after playing her a while, oh, this is the parry spot, because you won't do anything. She does have options, but I wouldn't call them unsafe, but it's more so that Akuma wants to be closer, and Juri's options to try to punish Akuma's parry move Juri closer, which is what Akuma wants. And it also makes her negative, meaning that he has his turn. This keeps her too busy to do a lot of counter zoning or space control as a whole. and spaces Akuma precisely where her stuff doesn't do her much good, forcing her to rely a lot more on heavy and EX Fuharin to get anything. But because of Akuma's spacing, the parry easily becomes part of situations she can benefit from. And her pressure after the throw and sweep knockdowns don't really stress Akuma out that much. Her best option is obviously to go for standing medium or crouch medium.
Final round. Fight.
There is a very specific spacing in which she can learn to hit her stand heavy punch, I believe it is. But most of the time, since Juri will want to be walking away to avoid certain things about Akuma's timing and spacing, it's unlikely, it's more likely that until the player has gotten to the point of thinking, you're going to keep parrying like that, therefore I should not back off, he'll get to keep on doing this. The final result, as you can see there, is that her best bet just becomes hitting sweep in neutral, which, while effective, is obviously likely to lead to bad things eventually. It therefore becomes increasingly important for Juri to charge and use heavy Fuharin in this match, as Akuma uses more and more of that parry spacing. Obviously, it helps if she has the others charged as well, in order to keep it going. Fortunately for her, Fuharin easily handles Demon Flip with the right timing, handles most of his fireballs, and will knock him out of Tatsu because of the way that Akuma's Tatsu works. He's relatively light in terms of the hitboxes on it, and a well-timed or well-spaced Fuharin will literally kick him out of
Round one.
that move.
Fight.
We're not sure why. It might be that Fuharin's one of the few moves that Juri has where the hitbox is much further forward than the hurtbox. We should check that. But you can see it play out here. Surely, Akuma does have things to worry about based on what Juri can do after that. But with a good enough timing and understanding of both sides of the matchup, it's unlikely that it's actually going to happen. And since he has such a long crouch medium kick, she can't just do her V-skill freely and expect it to work out. We'll stall on the punish. But there is the heavy Fuha.
Round two. Fight.
Now, as I've said, when you're playing a situation like this where your character has options, but only some of the time, your opponent is still in a good position if they keep on forcing you to think about that option set, because it's putting massive extra strain on your mind. Meaning that if they decide to switch to offense, your mindset is completely different now. Now, this isn't actually so as a general thing. The reason this works is not necessarily because Juri in particular can't punish Akuma's perfectly spaced parry. Not many characters can easily do it. The longer reach characters certainly can, or those who get benefits from things they can force Akuma to block, but Juri has no such options. Juri is one of the few characters in the game that really doesn't have a way to push herself forward with any plus move that will give her that sort of advantage. So it's more so that Juri and Akuma stand at a space that makes this work for Akuma more often, and once it does, she has more trouble putting herself in an advantage situation. Easiest answer is just to walk forward and throw, but a competent Akuma player will just react to that by doing like uppercut or something.
But those DP anti-airs are not the easiest thing in the world to do. So, thankfully I get some practice.
If you've built up enough reactive ability, you can probably manage to do Ryodan Satsu in the situation, but at that point you are avoiding playing footsies more so than you are defeating the parry.
Let's do this.
But we are back to discussions of Lara. As it does not seem like Professor Frash has decided to change character. Sunday's general handling of the Lara matchup doesn't really need much refinement in the straight sense. Lara is a relatively straightforward character, and simply understanding how to stay out of certain very specific bad situations is usually enough to handle her. If you cannot do it at all, then you die really fast, and if you can do it some of the time, then you're fine. The hard part here is therefore learning the rhythm of the Lara player, because Lara is a character who can have a lot of different rhythms. She's able to force changes in rhythm as well. Since Akuma does not have one of the best jumping medium kick situations in terms of neutral. Neutral jump medium kick is a problem for him, and he has to do as mentioned before. Use the demon flip a little bit, make the opponent think about whether or not they are okay with the attacking, and then take his space from there.
Lara wins.
But to shake that wake-up instinct definitely takes a while. This is because nearly every other character in the game, if they decide to just stick out buttons toward you on your wake-up, heavy ones, they're either going to whiff, or they've managed to make themselves just negative enough that a quick button of a particular type will save you. It might not be the same button you always hit, but the general feeling of, okay, button's time, is an easy feeling to start with. But you see there, had that been a wake up with buttons for any reason, it would have been probably bad. You can also reset yourself mentally when this happens as a generality with Lara. It's important to recognize that the heavy bolt knockdown that you saw earlier, despite looking like it's going to be the same thing, the higher you get in level, the less likely it is that Lara's going to go for anything too strong after that. And you have to learn a different way out of it. But your different ways out of it are closer to a real mix-up, and you have to think about it more. But we see that Santir now has control of the spacing enough to get the anti-airs. That command grab, always stressful.
Lara wins.
So there are quite a few reactions you have to learn in order to beat Lara when she's going full offense. But once you've got them, the match becomes a lot more manageable, and the Lara player has to work fairly hard. Looks like they might be changing character now. Yep. While this is a familiar matchup for Cosmic Wolf, he's probably also more familiar with someone who is likely to play a bit more defensively in particular situations or use particular canned mix-ups. We don't know what we're going to see, but based on the previous, it's more likely to be faster, at least. Faster than what Amara normally does. That said, Cosmic Wolf can probably use his standard tactics and practice the same as he uses for fighting her, with more of a focus on Suffragia's meter. And from the Ryu side, the general answer here is to see if you can get your opponent into a rhythm you can defeat with your zone. This is generally effective for Ryu against Urien as a whole, because Ryu has uppercuts. And therefore, Urien either is reduced to zoning, and therefore easier to pull into that, or controllable enough to get hit by stuff if he tries to go for things like headbutt or violent knee, as Amara generally tends to demonstrate. However, just like with Amara, there's a decent chance that moving forward with the headbutt into position to throw will at worst result in a throw tech, since the other solution is a very gutsy uppercut. But there's the zoning jump. It's gonna work. Didn't figure so. And again, the zoning jump. Urien is one of the characters weakest to the zoning jump in the game. He is one of the few characters where once he takes one step forward, you can probably jump at him. This is because Urien's anti-airs rely a lot on where you stuck out your attack button. Empty jumps sometimes cause him to whiff his anti-air if you jump from far enough.
Round one.
Weird buttons can sometimes mess up his timing, and so on. It's a hard job to anti-air with Urien from your walk forward. Armored, however, on defense is super easy because then you can anti-air really long jumps with headbutts. Kozlov is sufficiently familiar with and comfortable with this to know until you start fighting back in a particular way, I might as well keep throwing these because you already have full EH. But there's the anti-footsie tool. Hitting with the tip of Urian's crouch medium punch is a really good setup for that a lot of the time. Again, forcing Ryu to be really gutsy about that throw or uppercut. Oh, got him, but not quite. And but here's the rhythm, and the Hadouken fails. So execution error or timing error because of how fireballs work. There's the aforementioned change to that, but the parry, as expected. At the very least, we know that Kozlov is not likely to be freaked out by that occurrence, as has happened to him often enough in past fights. But there again, that deep jump in, and this time no armor to help him out of it. Fortunately, this match requires so little usage of Urian's moves in standard flow that once you have armor up, there's no obligation to use it for anything. You can just save it for a bad situation and just use it as, okay, now my move might be a little stronger than you expect. Ooh, execution fail on the headbutt. There's one though. Foot went forward, and as a result, stress. But Aegis is up, so craziness from Ryu's side might not work out. But that one slipped through due to the speed of the fireball. Useful. And perfect spacing on the Tatsu getting to right the edge there. We do see that fairly often. It's a powerful tool for Ryu in lots of matchups now, as if he's wrong and the opponent is slightly out of range, they have to flinch on the punish, which sometimes saves him from taking much damage anyway.
Let's do this.
This is a hard matchup for Ryu. By most people's standards in the game, all matchups are hard matchups for you. But the specific thing that makes this matchup hard for Ryu at this level is that he has to take a specific risk over and over and over. And it's really bad. The feeling of having to take a particular risk so many times
Round one.
is scary enough that most of us will hold back and not do it. Ryu constantly has to jump at Guile at a spacing that has the tiniest chance of making a flash kick with. But getting to that space without Guile already being in control or willing to jump himself is super hard to execute, because Ryu has so few tools for forcing Guile to think about that. For forcing Guile to go, okay, I should be throwing something at you. I should be doing this or doing that. Ryu has very few tools for that purpose. Therefore, getting Guile to do that without Guile being the one to jump because he sees an opportunity can be really hard.
Round two.
Your entire game plan therefore becomes about distracting Guile long enough that you can jump at him. And even when you jump at him, your goal isn't necessarily to hit him. It is one of the weirdest confirms in the game, as you're often looking for the moment where Guile stands up, but you're not specifically jumping in reaction to Guile standing. You're jumping either way, and if Guile happens to be standing, then you continue your offense. And if Guile is not standing, then you expect to be flash kicked and hope that he misses. The problem with this is, as you see here, every attempt to make Guile think about something and not just expect that jump is an opportunity for Guile to jump. The good thing about this is that once you've mastered the spacing, Guile's jump is less scary, because if you're at the exact right spacing, Guile's jump will whiff. And all you have to do is not panic.
Round one. Fight!
The other option, obviously, is to use Ryu's parry to distract Guile in a different way, but this is obviously not going to lead to much. Eventually, they'll both stop moving. Depending on which V-trigger Ryu is using, therefore, different things happen. If Ryu is using the parry, he wants Guile to jump, because Guile will be jumping at a range where he can't do much, and would either be parry, because while Guile's heavy kick is not really reactable exactly, if you're super primed for it, you might get away with it. One good option in this case is generally dashing forward and back, or using light tatsu to just move around a bit. But these are also risky things, so more stress. But you can see there that Guile has no options but to hit the heavy kick. He can't do other moves, meaning you get away with a lot. But can you get yourself to take the same risk over and over and over? Not everyone can do this easily.
Saphrasia seems pretty stubborn. So if anybody could, I would not be surprised if they did.
Still, that is the sort of thing that you practice it and you practice it, and then sadly it stops being very useful at high levels because the Guile player will just throw booms that you will land on. And similar things. Because their reactions are so much higher, meaning that it's stress.
Let's do this.
Now, Guile versus Alex is obviously not advantage to Alex, otherwise Guile would not be considered top tier and Alex low tier. Generally, it's not impossible for a low tier character to have a strong advantage over a high tier one. I'm not saying that at all. But if you look at the character archetypes, it would be very strange if the grappler, who has to spend all his time trying to slowly work his way in against the top tier zoner of the game, was not in the zoner's favor. Fortunately for Alex, he actually has a very similar game plan in this to Ryu. In other words, there is a range at which Alex can jump with his jumping medium kick, and I believe his heavy punch, where Guile can't necessarily do much, or can't be sure he should do much. The other half of this, of course, is that Guile must then either throw booms to get Alex to land on them, which is useful in Alex's case because he's one of the characters who gets over them really well, or jump himself. But Alex has a different benefit than Ryu does. When Alex feels as if Guile isn't distracted enough, Alex can just use his V skill to force Guile to react. And if Guile does not react, then Alex can do various things. The hard hit helps in certain situations. He has good long range. If he clips Guile in neutral with heavy kick, for example, as a serious thing, it becomes a problem. He doesn't have to chase Guile as a character unless Guile is throwing booms. So if you can get Guile to not throw booms because you might jump them, you have control at least somewhat.
Alex wins.
This sort of thing means that Guile's ability to beat Alex as a quote-unquote top-tier character is in that muddy space in the game where, yes, he has all the tools, and yes, if you play Guile perfectly, he should theoretically always win, but perfectly against Alex is kind of a high bar sometimes. So of course, top players go, this matchup is nearly impossible. Guile just wins it. And mid-level players go, I'm not really sure what y'all are talking about because I don't necessarily get that much out of this. That said, Alex player's judgment has to be on point as well, and if you flinch in terms of understanding when to use elbow versus something else, it can be really bad. Similarly, you can't really push on Guile too hard. After a while, he really can just flash kick out of a bunch of stuff.
Yes, I would say he's one of the characters that you most need the ability to not have your offense be binary.
Yes, he punishes that super hard. But here we have that perfect spacing for Alex where he can't really be hurt by Guile, and is just stressed out because he can't hurt Guile either. But once you've got the life lead, that spacing is your home. You could just sit there and be happy there because nothing's going to happen. This is because Guile is one of the least offensive capable characters in the game against characters like Alex who have that strong, basically invincible, super far anti-air. Alex is also one of the characters most capable of just doing that. Sitting, more or less relaxing and realizing, even if I take this hit, even if I mess up my parry, even if you are now frantic. You can't take your time and set up the best situation for yourself because you don't know if that will telegraph it enough for me to parry you, let me evade you altogether with some other move, etc. All these little things into people's mindsets matter a lot, and they're kind of hard to learn at first because we're used to thinking of games as, even competitive games, generally we think of them as monolithic. There's this thing that's supposed to happen, the thing that character A is supposed to do, the thing that character B is supposed to do. Fighting games are a one-on-one experience between two people's minds, and if you ask high-level players, they will usually tell you that. One of the design goals as it was expressed for Street Fighter V was in fact to try to make it so that you are reasonably sure that you are fighting your opponent and not just their character. And that made the game a lot harder for some people.
Round one. Fight!
There you see Guile's other option. Get close enough to start throwing booms and then doing hotkicks. As Alex doesn't have a really good response to this. However, Guile has to be careful if he messes up his spacing even a little bit, as hotkicks are vulnerable to ES Powerbomb. It's not that this is always true, again this is about spacing. The optimal situation for our Guile here is in fact to manage to land that jumping heavy kick, force Alex to block, and then do what you just saw. Crouch medium punch into boom, into hop kick, and just win from there. This is one of the better structures you see used. But even this is still taking a massive risk, because Alex mostly just has to defend it until Guile starts to feel too comfortable, and then he will still manage to get the EX powerbomb. However, our Guile now has control of the match in the mental sense as well, making it much more difficult for the Wolf to get out of this. And their rapid ability to switch between offense and defense, they're very fluid, they don't get caught on one mindset or the other, was enough to give them that jump for the win.
It's go time. Let's do this.
Jury versus Guile is a pain for Jury for a specific reason. It is mentally stressful because of the sheer number of things Jury has to track in terms of getting through Guile's zone, because she has lots of options for it, but they're all very, very slightly different. And they all rely on those spaces. She doesn't generally want to jump at him because she doesn't have the same, again, deep kick that makes characters stressed out, nor does she have particularly good follow-ups that won't leave her in front of his face and disadvantaged.
Round one.
So, she does have to try to get through the zoning somehow. But this is hard. This is hard because Guile can move forward behind slow booms, but he's relatively easily defeated if she powers through them with her V skill. The question therefore is, which boom did Guile do? Fortunately, she has a decent control over his jump heavy kick situation. As again, those deep things are generally stopped by perfectly timed Fuhari. She's also able to recover into forward dashes to deal with a lot of his stuff. And quick rising is generally slightly better for her in that situation than the alternative. Where she lacks is her corner escape ability. Fortunately for her, she can, compared to most characters, when she makes a flash hit, she gets a lot more out of it without too much work because the execution is easier. She doesn't have to do the walk forward, she probably can reach most of the time. But as you probably know, Guilebot 2.0 is not one of the characters against whom Just Fine can practice at the moment, Poverty Life, and therefore the Isukimi does not get immediately punished. Juri is able to punish this move in almost all situations because she tends to stand at the space where Guile will not be. His frame data won't be any different. He can't generally make it -2 against her twice in a row, for example. There, for example, she could have punished it, but this is again super hard to do, has to be trained for long periods, and it has to be done in lag. Well, a little lag.
This person's
Guile is
like kick throw game is throwing me off quite a bit.
Well, you have charged with the medium Fuharin, and it is an easy-ish way to resolve the problem. Gao's offense is relatively canned. You have to understand the structure of it, but once you've understood the structure of it, it's not that easy for the average Gao player to change it up and mess with you too much. He's more so counting on the fact that it will feel for a while as if he gets to hit buttons forever, and no one likes that at this level. Everyone wants to just get out of that. Furthermore, it's difficult because he is difficult to re-reversal properly. So, you end up with the usual problem. Theoretically, one can know everything that needs to be done, but actually doing it and feeling comfortable doing it is a different matter. He is, however, a decently easy character to dash away from, if you really need to do it. And this should probably be your go-to response to Guile pressure. When you don't know what else to do, especially fairly early into it, just mash back on the stick or pad, whatever. Especially toward the end of his longer strings. And that should sometimes get you what you need, or at least cause Guile to play a little differently, and that little difference may help you out.
Let's do this.
Akuma cannot do this the same way Ryu does. He does not have the jumping attack for the job. The air fireball helps, but not enough.
Round one. Fight.
He can use his red fireball, give himself a lot of space, and watch the opponent directly after it. That's the main thing Kuma needs to do in matchups. Since he has a projectile that can give him some space, the important thing is to not use that space for offense, but rather to use it to watch the opponent long enough to decipher what to do immediately. And you have to be fairly on point with this. If the opponent is jumping away, you have one set of options. If they're jumping forward, you have a different set of options. But you can see here that it forces Guile into that space that we were trying to set up before. The space where Guile wants to jump, but will probably miss if he does.
Round two. Fight.
If he tries to stand further out and deal with it that way, then Demon Flip starts to work. A lot. Demon Flip Punch, particularly. And since Akuma does have just enough time to respond to slow sonic booms with... Actually, I don't remember which red fireball. It might be any of them. The red fireball will eventually create a zone where neither character is at advantage.
Guile wins.
While this obviously isn't a comprehensive strategy, most Guiles will eventually just give up throwing booms and walk forward or jump through or find some way to respace themselves properly relative to the red fireball.
Fight!
It's a good start for getting yourself used to the position from which you want to throw it. Because the most important thing, as you can see here, is to get Guile to miss. As soon as you've gotten Guile to jump and miss, you have some control of the matchup. And there you see the other part of it.
Round 2. Fight!
This changes the match to the point where the Guile player is thinking more about more things. And that's generally all you want out of life. Make your opponent think harder. There we see the ESR fireball to control the space required. Pushing Guile back to where the red fireball starts to help out again. In our case, the Guile, I guess, got a little desperate. It's kind of hard to do that by mistake, so I guess it was deep jump into flash kick. This does work in some situations because Guile does land and then be able to immediately EX flash kick, or get blocked at the max range and then do the heavy flash kick. And there's generally no way out of that. In fact, you could even see in that spacing that it would come up because Suntir was close enough to the corner to make this a risk worth taking. I.e., once the knockdown was achieved, then you have Guile corner pressure. No backdashing allowed.
Let's do this!
But overall, the flow was good on both sides. Guile can use slightly more Sonic Blade in those situations, but you have to question whether or not you want to play that match in that way by trying to beat down your opponent with quick Sonic Booms or Sonic Blades, or trusting in your skill to do it and managing with ES Flash Kicks. But we have our other jury, the return of Django. As noted before, jury generally wants medium Fuha charged here. Light Fuha helps, but mainly to keep you safe after medium Fuha. And heavy doesn't do much. It's good for confirming, but you don't really need to confirm often enough in the matchup that you can risk charging it either. The important things here are confidence in your anti-zoning and backdashing in certain situations to prevent yourself from getting into trouble. As getting aggressive will eventually give Guile some advantages he wants, it's easier to just control the space. There's the Fuha, and there's the payoff. Guile is relatively susceptible to that move for a ton of reasons. So charge it as soon as you can, for the most part. Without the heavy Fuha charge, obviously, you lack the ability to get the big payoff. But you're already seeing it executed relatively well here. But it is not a way to open Guile up, so much as it is a way to stop Guile from opening you up. Recognizing the spacing that Gao is at, and getting it from there is fine. The reason you see that is a simple setup. Juri has a lot of moves and a lot of situations where continuing even more flashy combos with her V-trigger is not the goal. Her V-trigger gives her setups, and those setups allow her to do certain things.
Juri wins. Round one. Fight!
This is going to be a little harder now. Nope. Got time to get the charge, meaning that now she has all her tools and can sit this out basically. And there it goes. Juri is heavily about conditioning, making your opponent think particular ways and so on. So, you can expect this sort of thing a lot. What you cannot expect is more matches on stream tonight. The lounge will stay open, however. After this set, you're simply searching for just fine. 3 rounds first 2. Try to select off if you want to narrow it down. But as is customary, we're likely to see more randomness, less direct shifts and so on, so we close up at 9 as usual.
Final round. Fight!
So stream will end, rounds will not. You can join us tomorrow for our longer Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2. Tuesday train. And on Wednesday for more Sandbag Casuals. Almost certainly Street Fighter 5.
Juri wins.
So, of course, Kame House on Thursday. And Dead or Alive on Friday, probably. Well, for tonight, this has been Brilliant along with Just Fine for Team 2MK. Good night, everyone.